Throughout history, most humans suffered a grueling and painful life. And today, we're gonna learn about the top 10 worst years for humans.
Number 10, 1918. This year kicks off with a little something called the Spanish flu. Surprisingly, this flu wasn't actually from Spain, but it was still no bueno. Exact numbers for the death toll are kind of hard to pin down, but estimates range from 20 to 50 million human deaths globally. The Spanish flu was particularly deadly for two reasons. One, it was a brand new strain of the flu, and two, the conditions of the Great War made it so much easier for the disease to spread. Soldiers returning home brought the flu with them, infecting people in remote areas who had no immunity to the virus.
See, the thing is, back then too, technology was so bad that the medical field, they probably had no idea what to even do. I don't know exactly the dates, but I know that there's stories of trepidation where people would drill holes in your brain if you were having headaches, or they would do bloodletting to try to let out as much blood as possible and hope to get the disease out of you. Today, with what we know today, that is really stupid. That is the opposite of what should really be done. So back then it was a mix of one, diseases being terrible, but two, there just not really being any good medical practices to handle those situations.
What was extra special about the Spanish flu was that it was unusually deadly for young adults compared to other flu viruses of the time, leading to a significantly higher death toll. This disease was terrifying for doctors, not just because of how quickly it spread or how quickly their patients died, but the process of how people died from it. Heliotrope cyanosis was a symptom of the Spanish flu, where a patient's skin would slowly turn purple as their lungs filled with fluid, preventing them from getting enough oxygen into their bloodstream. The blue/purple color would start in their lips and fingers, but eventually spread across their whole body as they neared death. After the patient passed, their entire body would then quickly turn from purple to black. Truly horrific stuff. To make matters worse, 1918 was also the final year of World War I, which saw another 5 million global casualties and made most of Europe no fun.
Oh my God.
Also in this year, you had the Russian Revolution going on.
Well, I didn't even think about the fact that there could be multiple other things happening during that time. I was just thinking, worst year to be a human, the flu, the Spanish flu. That sounds terrible. But no, that is actually just the start. There's other entire world wars going on. You know what? Let's move on. Let's move on here.
Ended the House of Romanov for good with the assassination of Nicholas II and his family this year. This revolution allowed Vladimir Lenin to take power, where he established a totalitarian dictatorship that oversaw the mass killing of political dissidents. The revolution was marked by brutal civil war and famine, which killed millions more. And finally, the Treaty of Versailles was being drafted, which, while not initially terrible, put Germany in a super bad mood that had some pretty major downstream consequences. But more on that later.
So it sounds like World War II is going to be a part of this too, which is crazy because it's too far apart from each other. I'm assuming the Black Plague is going to be in here too, but also I feel like it should be long ago, even before these times, back when there was no technology at all, because back then the majority of people, I think at least, were suffering. Unless you were of royal blood and you were high up in the hierarchy, most people were peasants and farmers and blacksmiths, and today to be that is fine, but back then it was almost slavery in a way, that everyone would be starving back then just to get some bread, and honestly every day back then was probably bad. Anyway, number 9.
1492. We all know in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But by doing that, Columbus also opened up a portal to hell for nearly everyone who is currently living in the Americas. Nearly every indigenous person that came in contact with a European settler was either killed by a disease, killed in the slave trade, killed in war, or died of a broken heart.
This is true, actually. The majority of people were killed by disease that Europeans brought over. A lot of people think that Europe just came over and slaughtered everybody. Now, there was some slaughtering being done for sure. I'm not denying that. But a majority of the deaths were due to infections and essentially a plague that the indigenous people just didn't have any immunity to.
And while it certainly didn't all happen in one year, the introduction of European settlers to the Americas ended up killing 90% of the indigenous population.
Yeah.
Diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza decimated communities that had no immunity to these foreign illnesses. I guess one could argue that the events of 1492 had positive effects on much of humanity, leading to the age of exploration and the eventual globalization of trade and culture that brought us things like pizza and chocolate. However, the near extinction of an entire continent civilization does put it on our list. Number 8, 2008. This is probably the height of recency bias.
Wait, what happened in 2008? Hang on. I was alive. I was 10 years old. I was chilling, bro. I was playing Club Penguin. I was playing Pokemon. Life was great for me in 2008. I don't know, actually don't know what was so bad.
Who cares? It sucked. 2008 was the year the entire world realized that rich people just basically make up how much money there is. And for a number of reasons too complicated to go into in this video, something called Lehman Brothers went out of business, and then the entire global economy collapsed. Stock markets around the world crashed. The American auto industry nearly went belly up, and the cost of food and gas went through the roof.
So I knew about like the whole market crash and everything. I didn't realize it was global though. I thought it was just America that crashed, but I guess America, a lot of other countries are relying on America's economy that then other countries would have been affected. But I feel like America probably is what got affected the most here.
The worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, causing millions of Americans to lose their jobs and homes. Also, if you've ever wondered why do houses cost so much these days? Well, in the aftermath of the 2008 mortgage crisis, new home construction basically stopped for about 10 years because nobody could get a loan. And since there wasn't a 10-year hiatus on unprotected, we now have way too many people and way too few houses. So thanks again 2008 for still ruining all of our lives. China and Australia's economy actually grew during the Great Recession? What do you mean America isn't the same?
Hang on. I honestly didn't even know humans were alive back then. I'm assuming it's gonna be during the Ice Age? I don't know, I'm kind of an idiot.
We're a little loosey-goosey on the exact year, but trust me, whenever it was bad. Rewind Earth's clock 70 or so millennia, and you'll witness what's known as a supervolcano eruption. This particular event is known as the Toba catastrophe and is probably the thing Indonesia is second most famous for after Komodo dragons.
Okay, I was way off. I wish I hadn't said anything I just said because now I feel like an idiot and I'm ashamed and I'm embarrassed and I hope my mom doesn't watch this or she might have some strong words for me.
This eruption set off a 10-year volcanic winter that nearly eliminated the entire human species. The Toba eruption released so much volcanic ash into the atmosphere that it blocked sunlight, leading to a drastic drop in global temperatures. The few survivors faced harsh conditions with scarce food and resources, struggling to maintain their communities.
So smart!
The entire human population left on Earth was somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 people, or roughly the size of Brandon, South Dakota.
Wow.
You've never heard of Brandon, South Dakota? Okay, Madison Square Garden can hold around 20,000 people, so the entire population left on Earth after that eruption could fit in MSG twice.
That's crazy.
This phenomenon is known as a genetic bottleneck, and is also why we're all kind of related.
Wait, that's actually insane. I didn't realize that humanity got down to just a couple thousand people at one point. Also, I'm pretty sure there's a volcano in Yellowstone that if it erupts will have very similar consequences to that volcanic eruption. And apparently no one even knows like when it's going to erupt. Like it's hard to really determine exactly when that's gonna happen. So people are kind of just fingers crossed, hope that it's not gonna happen anytime soon. Anyway, number 6 is 1929.
The Roaring Twenties came to an abrupt end in 1929 when the US stock market crashed, setting off, stop me if you've heard this before, a global economic collapse. The Great Depression that followed was a decade-long economic disaster that affected almost every country in the world. Mental health was at an all-time low immediately following the market crash. Self-deletion rates were so high that some hotel operators in New York City would ask guests if they needed a room for sleeping or jumping out of. That's real. In the US, 1 in 4 people became unemployed, and wages for the remaining workforce were basically cut in half. Bread lines and soup kitchens became a common sight, and many people lost their homes and savings. One farmer of the day knew he couldn't afford to feed his sheep, so he slit their throats and threw them down a canyon instead of letting them starve. It's like, what, they don't like sheep? The events of 1929 set off a decade of economic hardship that culminated in Earth's favorite pastime, World War.
I feel like a lot of these events are kind of boiling up for modern day too. Like, I guess that still was relatively modern day, but with some events that have been going on around the world recently, low-key, if some things happen here and some things happen there, we might have another sort of World War or Great Depression or something along those lines on our hands.
Favorite pastime, World War. Number 5, 1601. If you take one thing away from this video, it should be that volcanoes are bad. So bad, in fact, that one volcano in Peru basically turned the lights off for the whole planet. The eruption of Huayna Patina in 1600 was one of the largest volcanic events in recorded history, spewing vast amounts of ash into the atmosphere. The summer of 1601 was known as the summer with no sunshine. Sunlight levels dramatically decreased everywhere in the world, causing mass famine, but nowhere more so than Russia.
I can't even grasp how what that even means, to be honest. Obviously I know volcanoes are big, but for the eruption to be so big that it covers the entire earth in ash and cloud and dust. What are we even talking about? How is that possible?
Sunlight led to crop failures and livestock death. A third of the Russian population starving to death in the 2 years following the eruption. No sunshine also meant it was extremely cold. So to keep warm, many in the region turned to killing any animal with fur they could find, not just for food, but also to create clothing and blankets. Accounts from the time describe people so desperate for food that they ate grass, their pets, and each other. Which means all of us are just one cloudy summer away from cannibalism.
That is pretty, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't be a cannibal. And I know, it's dude, what? That's crazy. No way you would ever eat someone. And I don't want to. Let me make that abundantly clear. I feel like sometimes I say things and it's so you're a cannibal? No, I'm not a cannibal. But if I had to, you know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to die. And if that means I gotta eat my boys, I will be eating my boys. You gotta do what you gotta do. Number 4, 1942. That would be World War II.
Not much to see here, just worldwide violence and genocide resulting in millions of deaths. At the tail end of 1941, Japan made a monumental strategic error and, not so elegantly, insisted that the US become heavily involved in World War II. This essentially turned America into a death factory, where every able-bodied human was either making stuff that killed people or just killing people. The war effort mobilized entire populations, leading to the development of new weapons and technologies, including the Manhattan Project, which would cause all kinds of problems for future humans. Meanwhile, soldiers and civilians in Russia and China were dying by the thousands every day. The brutal fighting on the Eastern Front and the Pacific Theater claimed millions of lives. Nazi Germany continued its war crimes and genocide, so not great.
I honestly feel pretty guilty for the way that I live today, because of how many literally billions and billions of people had to go through, suffering, war, starvation, thirst, all of that stuff. And that I actually think is the majority of people throughout history had to go through that lifestyle. And I don't. And don't get me wrong, I recognize that I'm lucky. I recognize I'm blessed. I recognize the position I'm in is very rare and I'm super, super grateful for it. But at the same time, I do feel kind of guilty because most people on earth struggle to be able to afford food. I'm not talking about America. America is very well off. I'm talking about, countries in Africa, for example, some countries in Asia, some countries in the Middle East, countries in South America. There's so many places on earth where people are really, really struggling. And sometimes I look at myself and I look at what I'm doing and I look at the lifestyle that I live and I feel guilty. I'm gonna be honest. I feel guilty. Anyway, number 3 is literally the following year, 1943.
Remember 1942? Like that, but again. 1943 saw some of the deadliest battles of World War II. The Battle of Stalingrad, one of the bloodiest battles in history, ended in early 1943 with the defeat of the German army. This marked a turning point in the war, but came at a staggering cost of over 2 million casualties. In the Pacific, the Battle of Guadalcanal and the continued island-hopping campaign resulted in massive losses on both sides. And Nazi Germany continued doing Nazi Germany things. So again, a horrible time. Number 2, 1347. Welcome to medieval times.
Is this a plague?
You really can't say anything about the mid-1300s that doesn't involve the bubonic plague.
Yep, there it
is. In
is.
1347, the Black Death began ravishing most of Eurasia and parts of North Africa. Within a few years, the plague killed roughly a third of Europe, which probably put a pretty big dent into the cappuccino and scarf
Wait,
industry.
is that a thing? Wait, if you get the plague and when you die, you turn black? Is that real? Wait, it was called the Black Plague, wasn't it? And I'm not trying to be I'm just saying it's scary, bro. It's scary. That's a scary idea that it's just a scary thought that when you die, you turn black. It's like a wither skeleton. It's scary.
The plague was caused by a bacterium in the fleas of rats, and rats were basically the podcasts of the 1300s. Completely unwanted, but absolutely everyone had them. Death from the bubonic plague was swift, but painful. An infected person would develop horribly swollen lymph nodes, often accompanied by fever and diarrhea, and would usually be dead in under a week. Medicine of the time was primitive to say the least. A popular cure for the plague included taking a healthy chicken, plucking its back and bottom clean, and then strapping it to the patient's open sores. The idea was if the chicken became ill, it was helping to pull out the disease from the patient.
You know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for doctors. To put yourself in a scenario where you're willing to risk your own life in order to help random people that you don't even know is very honorable. But God almighty, is that not the dumbest thing you've ever heard in your entire life? I actually can't believe that's real. I almost don't even believe that.
Okay, let's check your chicken today. Oh, awesome, it's almost dead. You're doing great. This would be repeated until the patient or the chicken died, often both in many cases. Chickens weren't the only animal rubbed on boils. Plague doctors also tried rubbing cut-up pieces of snakes on them as well. See, snakes were considered evil, and so was the plague. So the idea was that if evil things liked other evil things, putting the snake on a boil would trick the plague into following the snake and leave the patient's body.
I honestly wish I didn't hear that, because that makes me feel like humanity actually is really stupid.
Another cutting-edge cure for the Black Death was eating crushed emeralds. People who couldn't afford emeralds would drink arsenic or mercury instead, which probably was just a little less effective than the chicken and the snake. All the anguish from this pandemic began to pull society apart at the seams. Many people took the chaos of the situation as an opportunity to steal from the sick and weak. Needless to say, people were so scared to help one another. Many were left to die alone in misery. It took centuries for Europe and other parts of the world to recover from the mass destruction of the Black Death.
I don't know what to say, you know? I just think that in today's day and age, it'd be almost impossible for the Black Plague to spread the way that it did back then, just because of all of our medical advancements. Because back then they were, I mean, you saw what their ideas were to cure the plague. Today, I think we have much better medical practices than then. On a bright note, I don't think that'll really be possible for that to happen again.
Parts of the world to recover from the mass destruction of the Black Death. Number 1, 536. This is essentially a greatest hits of all the worst moments from human history. Things kick off with our old friend the supervolcano, which sent a cloud of volcanic ash over the entire northern hemisphere. This left most of the world in virtual darkness for 18 months, brought the global temperature down 30 degrees, and caused, say it with me, widespread famine. Things were extra bad in China, where dust rained to the ground by the handful, and 70 to 80% of the population died. The lack of sunlight led to crop failures, starvation, and social unrest. But wait, there's more! On top of extreme food scarcity, a plague broke out in Europe. People would break out in pus-filled boils before perishing by the thousands, making disposal of the bodies impossible.
You know what I was thinking too, is like if there was another volcanic eruption and the whole world, you know, had no sunlight for 20 years and the temperature of the earth dropped 30 degrees and all that, it would turn into an anarchy where be every man for himself. Once people start starving, they'll do anything to survive, such as eating their friends. It really sounds like if another big volcano goes off in the world, we're gonna be in big trouble. So I'm hoping that never happens during my lifetime.
Bodies were heaped in piles or thrown into the sea, only to wash back up days later.
Oh my God, dude.
And the southern hemisphere wasn't spared.
That was pretty sad. I feel like we've been watching a lot of sad videos recently. And if you guys have been enjoying them, specifically this one, make sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and click right here to watch more.